Hi, this is Alan Gleeson for ADSR. Please subscribe to the ADSR YouTube channel for further tutorials. In this video, we're going to look at recreating an 808 style clap using Operator. To break down the original, I've got a sample of an 808 clap here. And when we go in and look at the sample, we can actually see it's composed of a number of sounds rather than a single sound. So it's got a sort of repeating white noise and then an additional white noise with a tail at the end. So there's various ways that we can recreate this, but I'm going to go into Operator. I've got a little note drawn in there, and I'm also using a note length object to dial in the exact length of the note that I want. So to begin with, I'll set my oscillator to be a white noise generator. So noise white. So when I trigger it, get our typical white noise. And how I'm going to implement this is that in order to get the repeating section that we saw at the beginning, I'm going to use the loop mode within my envelope section here. So when I turn this on, there's a number of controls that we have. We've got the loop time here, which sets the time it takes after the decay time to loop back to the beginning of the sample. And the other main parameter that we're going to look at is our decay. So I'm going to bring my loop time all the way down. So it's practically at 0.2 milliseconds. And my decay time is going to set the time of the repeats. So I'll bring the sustain down for a minute. And if we go back to our original sample, I'm going to zoom in a bit. We can see that the first repeat that we get is in around 11 milliseconds. And the second one is around 23, 24 milliseconds. So generally every 12 milliseconds we get a repeat before the end of the sample when we get a sustaining white noise. So in order to do this, I'm going to set my decay time to 12 milliseconds. That would mean that after 12 milliseconds, or more correctly 12.2 milliseconds, it will loop back to the beginning and repeat itself. And because I'm using the note length device, every time I manually trigger the note, I'll just get a note produced that's 30 milliseconds long that's getting me a repeat every 12 milliseconds or 12.2 milliseconds. So that's given me the beginning of the sound. So if I was to say close down the beginning of the 808 here, so that we're just hearing this beginning section here, and just have a listen to that. So it's not exactly right yet, but it's starting to approach the sound that we're trying to reach. So the next section that we want to look at is the decay section. And I'm going to bring in a second white noise generator. So I'll bring this up. And this is going to give us our decay. But at the minute when I'm actually triggering this note, it's triggering from the beginning. Whereas when we compare that with the sample, we can see that the sustaining section comes after the repeating percussive section. So approximately, say, if you've got 3 hits there and they're 12 milliseconds each, somewhere around the 36 milliseconds mark. So again, this is, you can dial this into taste. So in order to get that, or have the second sound come in after a certain length, I'm going to take my peak value here down to 0. And now my attack is going to allow me to delay the onset of this particular sound. So if we just listen to this by itself, so now when I adjust my attack time, I can delay the onset of the note. And I can set this to any time as long as it's not longer than the actual note length itself. Once I go past, say, the 30 millisecond set there, when I trigger the note, nothing will happen. So I'll just dial it in there. I'll bring my decay all the way down. And I'll add a bit of release. So when I combine that with the first oscillator, so I'm just going to tweak the attack time. So that's the kind of two components that we have that actually make up the sound. Obviously, we're still not there yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in a filter. And this will allow us to actually tune the sample. Because we're only dealing with white noise here, if I put this to bandpass, now the cutoff frequency will allow me to actually tune the sample. So I want a bit more grit or drive to the sound. I'm going to change it from the clean filter model to OSR. And I'm going to add a bit of drive here. Another typical element of a synthesizer to use when designing drum sounds is a pitch envelope. I'm going to turn on the pitch envelope and get it to control the pitch of our oscillators. But I'm only going to have it affect the second oscillator, the one that's giving us our decay. So I'll bring the initial pitch all the way up, and then I'll bring the sustain and the end all the way down. And just modify the decay there, so we can get different variations happening there. And that's our basic 808 type clap. Obviously now there's a lot of variations that we can bring in. So we can alter the filter to tune the sample. We can maybe add a bit more drive. We can bring in a shaper if you wanted to add a bit more grit. It's getting quite loud there now. If we wanted to tune it further, instead of just being a white noise, we could set it to looped white noise. And that will allow us to alter the pitch of the sound. So if we just listen to the beginning section, put it into fix there. I can dial in various settings there, or I could put this one back to just regular white noise, and I can put the tail section into looped. So I'm going to just listen to that by itself. Get a ringing kind of sound, bring it in with the beginning section. So from here we can add further effects if we want to add some additional character to the sound, bring something like erosion in, or maybe even a bit of overdrive, and add a bit of compression for a good measure. Of course, we can alter the character of those beginning repeats by altering the decay time here. Going to bring the tail down a bit, take that erosion off just for now. It's getting a bit fizzy. And we can alter the position of the decay section. If we want it longer, we can dial in a longer length here. Using this method allows us to mimic the sound design of the 808 style clap and then add some further variations to customize it ourselves. The other method that I'll quickly look at is a method that can be applied on any synthesizer. This method uses a similar setup, except we don't use the looping setup. So I'll just give it my first oscillator. I'll set this to white noise. And instead of getting the oscillation or the repeat through the looping envelope, this time I'm going to use an LFO. So I'll set my LFO. For the shape, I'm going to use saw down. I'm going to set the range to high, and I'll dial in something that's around 40 Hertz. So this value here doesn't correspond to frequency. If you look in the lower left hand corner, you'll see what I'm dialing in there. So I've analysed it beforehand, and 40 Hertz will give us our repeats that are around the 12 millisecond length that we were implementing in the other version. I'll set the amount up to 100. And now for the destination of the LFO, I'll turn it off for pitch. And I'll set destination B to volume A. So now the LFO is going to modulate this parameter here. So if we alter the rate of the LFO, we can alter the spacing between the repeats. Take the release time off there, and then to get my decaying section we can do something similar to what we did before, where we get our envelope, bring our peak all the way down and use our decay, and then we get our decay section coming in. I could tweak this further with a bit of filtering, and with both of these sounds we can add a bit of spread just to give it a bit of stereo width. And again, I'll bring in my drive for the filter to give it a bit more dirt. And let's tweak the LFO rate a bit. Make it a bit tighter at the beginning. Let's go back to my first version and I'll give it a bit of spread as well there. So that's without the spread. Add a bit of spread in. Take off that overdrive. So there's two quick methods for creating 808 style claps. There's a lot of further variation that can be added. You could add some frequency modulation to the sound or add further processing afterwards to customize the sound to taste. To tune the samples, we use our filter, and we can also set the oscillators to be looped white noise if we want to tune the white noise to be more complementary to our other drum sounds. So hopefully you found that useful. This has been Alan Gleeson for ADSR. Please subscribe to the ADSR YouTube channel for further tutorials.